to welcome you to an evening with Mr. Randall Robinson. Mr. Robinson is going to speak to us tonight about race in America, the basis for U.S. foreign and domestic policy. Mr. Robinson is a featured speaker in Sonoma State University's celebration of Black History Month, and tonight's lecture is also part got to be ready for the ad-libs there. Mr. Robinson is, this lecture is also part of the Intercultural Center's Conversation Peace Lecture Series. Future participants in this lecture series include the Cherokee Nation's Wilma Mankiller on April 28th. We'd like to invite you back for that. I'd like to acknowledge the sponsors of tonight's event, including Sonoma State University's Intercultural Center and Associated Student Productions. Support has graciously been provided by the Instructionally Related Activities Fund. Our guest tonight is a political activist, author, and internationally respected advocate for human rights and democracy. He's the author of several acclaimed bestsellers, including The Debt, What America Owes to Blacks, and Quitting America, The Departure of a Black Man from His Native Land. The Chicago Defender calls the book Quitting America, quote, a book that is both unflinching in its indictment of past wrongs and an impassioned call to our nation to educate all Americans, black and white alike, about the history of Africa and its people. The Debt tells us in no uncertain terms what white America owes blacks and what blacks owe themselves, unquote. Mr. Randall holds a bachelor's degree from Virginia Union University and a Juris Doctorate from Harvard Law School. He's a founder of Trans Africa, an organization established to promote African voices in international policy making, and was a leader of the Free South Africa movement, which pushed successfully for the imposition of comprehensive economic sanctions to end apartheid in South Africa. Columbia College, Morehouse College, Ohio Wesleyan University, and the University of Massachusetts Amherst are just a few of the universities who saw fit to award Mr. Robinson honorary degrees in recognition of efforts such as this. He has appeared on such well-respected news shows as Charlie Rose and the McNeil-Lehrer NewsHour. And just in the last hour or so that I've had a chance to visit with Mr. Robinson, I have discovered that he is a true gentleman and educator. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Randall Robinson.
Good evening. I am very glad to be here tonight and to talk with you about your great responsibilities as young Americans, where our country has been in the world and where we are going, where you must take over from old people like me. I want to start with two stories, I think. Things that happened to me when I was very young that remain etched in my memory. I recall when I went to college, when I started in college, I was 18 years old. I had no idea of what I wanted to do with my life, as I expect most young people don't really know. And I started in pre-med. Somebody said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a doctor. And I took a zoology class from Dr. Wells, and somewhere in the first month of the class, Dr. Wells threw a big cat up on the table and handed me a scalpel. He said, cut her open, Mr. Robinson. That ended my medical school career. I learned then that there's a big difference between what you want to be and what you want to do. And so I wanted to be a doctor, but it became clear very soon that I did not want to do doctor things. I have encountered in my career many people who run for public office who want to be members of Congress, want to be senators, want to be the President of the United States, but have no clue, really, about what they want to do. And sometimes only become dangerous when they do discover that. But this is something that I think young people need to understand early on. Many years ago, the great Supreme Court jurist Louis Brandeis said that the most important office in a democracy is the office of citizenship. It means that the people that we elect are not responsible for the course of events in a nation, but those who elect them are responsible. It means that we must oversee what they do. We must test them. We must score them. We must evaluate them. And we must judge them. But to do that, we must know about the events of our time. The most important value and ingredient in the running of a democracy is the whole business of having an enlightened citizenry. It means that we have to know about the world in which we live. We have to have an insatiable intellectual curiosity. We not only have to think, but we have to learn to think critically. You see, in years past, the world was a less dangerous place. The problem with the human animal is that what we have learned about technology we can store in books and build on and develop technology incrementally through generations because of books, that one generation can take up where the last one left off. And you build it and you build it and you build it until your weaponry becomes sophisticated enough to destroy the world. And so you improve the technology, but the human animal that controls the weapon is the same human animal that pulled itself upright so many eons ago. And so when one was throwing rocks, it was one thing. But now with the same relatively sociably primitive animal with nuclear warheads, you see, in a crowded world, this business becomes a dangerous enterprise indeed. And so one of the things we need to think hard about, every American, every university, every teacher in every part of the country, is how do we start to participate as little d Democrats and Americans who take the responsibility of citizenship seriously. Voting in a democracy is a ritual. It's important, but it is not the most important responsibility of democracy. The most important responsibility is to first learn and then to participate actively in the process. And so it means that we've got to understand, in a microcosmic way, we have a diverse society that we can't any longer hide from the world or from each other. And it means that in every place that we can find, we have to recreate and represent that diversity and learn from each other. I've gone to so many campuses on which campus leaders think foreign students are lucky to have an opportunity to come and study in the United States. When it should be that the Americans are lucky to have them in our midst. Because while we can't travel to all of these places, when we have these students in our midst, we can learn so much from them about the world around us. This is not just intellectually developmental, but it may practically save our planet from ourselves. Simply understanding something about other cultures. Of course, the other problem that we have is that we live in a present tense culture. Most Americans don't know anything about anything that happened year before last. Most can't name a province in Canada or a state in Mexico. If you ask most Americans, what was the best country in the world? The vast majority would say America is the greatest country in the world. 99% of those who would say that have never seen another country. It's an amazing sort of feat of self-absorption. The way Americans trick themselves in believing these sort of things. It's a kind of rampant triumphalism that we must be the best country in the world. We must be the most powerful country in the world. We must assert ourselves in the world, and the world must do as we say. I saw something the other day in the news, several pieces, about American troops in Iraq. And apparently the troops, because of a program that they were running, had passed out a great deal of candy to Iraqi children and doll babies and things of that sort. And they had spent a great deal of time trying to cultivate friendship in the town. And apparently plans were being laid by the insurgents to make war against the Americans. And when an American convoy was going down a certain thoroughfare and encountered an obstruction, they had to turn and go in another way. And when they went in that other way, their vehicles got blown up and 5 or so American soldiers died. What did the American uninjured soldiers feel? They felt this enormous anger at the people of the community that they thought knew what the insurgents were planning and did not tell them. And they expressed outrage that these people in this community did not tell them what was going on. Now, I found that a most incredible reaction. Have we ever turned this thing around? Have we ever imagined what it would be like to have Iraqi soldiers occupying Sonoma, speaking Arabic, kicking the doors into your house at 3 in the morning, dragging out your elderly mother and your children, or stopping you at roadblocks and dragging your loved ones from the car, or firing on the vehicle because it doesn't stop. Can you imagine what that feels like? We are in somebody else's country, but we think it belongs to us. Now, this is not an indictment. It's an observation of what has happened to us. We think the world belongs to us, and the world loathes us for it. But we don't know because we can't see the world. You must see how dangerous this is. Many years ago, in 1967, when I went to Harvard Law School, we had these big sections. And one of my sections was torts law, the first year. I was 26 years old. I had never sat in a classroom next to a white person in my life. I grew up in total segregation in Richmond, Virginia. And so I had never even met any white Americans before I went into the military. Never been in a classroom with a white until I arrived at Harvard Law School. And I recall being in a section of 150 students for torts for Charles Freed, who later became Ronald Reagan's Solicitor General. And one of the torts issues, one of the areas of torts, has to do with public nuisance. You know, some factory in your neighborhood that belches smoke, makes obnoxious noises, or causes some other kind of public nuisance and disturbance that devalues your property and disturbs your peace and that sort of thing. This is a tortious activity that you can actually take to court and recover money with a civil claim. And there were about 5 black students in the class out of 150, sitting in separate parts of the classroom, all around in this Hollywood Bowl kind of semicircle, looking down at the professor. And he said, "Can anyone else think of another kind of nuisance that we haven't named here today?" And there was a fellow, a liberal fellow from Cornell, name was Mark Green, who later worked for Ralph Nader and ran for office in New York. And Mark said, "Well, how about black people moving into your neighborhood?" And the black students all looked at each other. You see? We didn't say anything. The Harvard Law students discussed this as if it were a valid legal theory to discuss for its intellectual merit. 30-plus years later, I have never forgotten the moment. I wrote about it in one of my books. And when Mark ran for office, the New York papers called me. I told them the story. They put it in the newspaper. And Mark said that, well, I may have said something like that and that sort of thing because he's this big liberal. You see, you never know whom you are offending unless you develop sensitivity to people and their humanity and a respect for them and the cultures that give birth to them. And so education is a big proposition. More than half of your education will happen outside of your classroom. It will happen in what you get from each other. How diverse is this community? How has it failed if it is not diverse? And if it is not diverse, what does that bode for the young people who are getting a skewed idea of how the world is actually constructed? This is very important, not just as a moral, ethical issue. It is very important with implications for where our nation is going in the world, and how much our young men and women will have to suffer unnecessarily, to die on foreign battlefields for nothing. You know how many Americans have died in Iraq? You have no idea of how many Iraqis have died. You know how many Americans have been kidnapped in Iraq? You have no idea of the thousands of Iraqis have been kidnapped. You have no idea that we have destroyed a culture and gone to war based on lies told to us by the government that we elected. And what is our responsibility? Young people, this may be the last time in your lives, and you're free to act on your conscience. You know, when you get old, you're going to get bills. You're going to get spouses and mortgages and children and all of that stuff. And I remember when we took over buildings at Harvard, one parent came and pleaded with the child, please come out of that building, Billy. We worked so hard to get you here. And we told Billy to run along because your mother loves you and we understand. But I've always believed that young people have been the compass of our nation. You brought us sanctions against South Africa. You ended the Vietnam War, where our nation has turned in the right direction socially. Our young people have been responsible for it. One of the saddest things that you can ever see is an audience of apathetic young people. There's nowhere to go from there. That's when the clock has stopped ticking and bad things lie ahead. And so I like to see activist young people, thinking young people, even when I think some of the things that they're planning are lunatic. Think about something, do something, and really learn something. I've always been rather upset about these narrow notions, in any case, of Black History Month. I didn't know you could segregate history in any case. Dick Gregory said they even gave us the month with some of the days missing. It's not that I'm not glad that we don't have Black History Month. I'm only saddened that there's a necessity for it, because we don't generally in our country tell anybody else's story. You see, when you suggest to a people that they have no history, you strip them of self-possession. You make them valueless. You make them wanderers in a strange sea. And so they feel lost. And what happens to not only blacks, but Latinos and Asians and others and foreigners in our culture, we try to fit these people with clothes that are not theirs. Even the way Black History Month has been celebrated. You know, you tell us about George Washington Carver and how many things he did with that peanut. And you even truncate that, you see, because George Washington Carver was the man that Henry Ford chased after, the man that that Edison chased after and tried to woo away from Tuskegee, offering him more money. The man who saved Southern agriculture, who was sought by the White House. Carver was a great scientist, but he is only remembered for that peanut. Martin Luther King has been trivialized down to a sentence of one speech when he was a great global humanitarian. We have this tendency in our culture to know as little as possible, as if education were a game show, and to suggest that black culture and black history began with slavery, as if we had no history that were thousands of years old. I remember once I saw Morley Safer on 60 Minutes, and this is when the Pope was very ill, before the Pope died, and College of Cardinals was beginning to put together the short list, and on the short list was Cardinal Lorenzi of Nigeria. And Morley Safer was talking to church lay people and hierarchs and officials and that sort of thing. He said, "Do you think it is possible that the College of Cardinals could select a black pope? And wouldn't that be a breakthrough?" Ooh. The first 500 years of the Catholic Church, there were 3 popes from Africa. But nobody knew anything about it. Surgeons in Timbuktu in the 13th century were doing cataract surgery. But nobody knew anything about it. We were over there trashing Iraq as if the Iraqis were lesser people. They're the children of a 7,000-year-old civilization. They taught the world to read. But Americans don't know anything about it. But we think we're the greatest people in the world. Some of the least sophisticated, the most provincial, the least well-educated, and the most dangerous, and totally self-absorbed. And so I tell young people wherever I go, if you want to complete your education seriously, understand that education doesn't come alone from a book. It is a lifelong pursuit. It has to do with a voracious appetite for reading and talking and visiting and traveling and seeing. If you want to be an educated person, you got to get out of Sonoma. You got to go somewhere. I don't care where you go, but go with an open mind. Learn other religions. Appreciate other languages. Learn other customs. Talk to other peoples. See your country and your culture from the outside in. It will make you better members of a global family. It will make you better Americans. It will bring you closer to Louis Brandeis's dream. It will make you understand the true essence of democracy. I've worked on many issues in my time. I don't know of any that has been more distorted for American popular consumption than the issue of Haiti. I live in the Caribbean. It is a necklace of islands that are steadfastly democratic, middle income, socially very stable. Haiti has been different. It has had a difficult time. One of the things that all curious people should do, with every book you read and every lecturer you listen to, is to ask why. You know, when you read stuff about what Congress is doing, you ask why. If you want to understand any kind of policy, you learn to follow the money. You say, who benefits? That's not in the newspaper. But you have to find that out to understand why A, B, and C were done. And so I think about this when I think of Haiti. After the French Revolution in the 1790s, Haiti was the most important colonial property of France when Napoleon was building the French global empire. They had a huge slave population there. One ex-slave, whose name was Toussaint Louverture, organized ex-slaves, escaped slaves, to mount a rebellion. And for the first and only time in world history, these people defeated the armies of Napoleon Bonaparte. They defeated the armies of England and the armies of Spain and freed themselves and threw open the gates of their new republic to any runaway slaves from any place on earth, and then gave arms in Latin America to Simón Bolívar so that Latin Americans could be freed. And the free republics that you see in Latin America now could exist. Ex-slaves in Haiti changed the direction and composition of North and South America. They made possible the Louisiana Purchase, because after Napoleon's defeat, he said, I've had it with empire. And Thomas Jefferson was able to make that purchase for little or nothing. The same Thomas Jefferson who looked at the slaves on his plantation in Monticello and saw what they took from what was happening in Haiti and became worried and imposed a global embargo on the new free republic of Haiti in 1804. Those sanctions imposed by France and the Western world, led by the United States, would last until the Emancipation Proclamation. And then in 1915, Woodrow Wilson invaded Haiti and stayed for 19 years and took everything that could be stolen and made it available to American companies. And since then, we have overthrown every Haitian government tried to do anything for the descendants of Toussaint Louverture. Now, this is just one case. This is replicated in so many places. You've got to know what your country is and is not doing. I have never run across a case anywhere in the world where a leader was trying to do something for the poor in their country that our country supported. We have always consistently, invariably lined up on the wrong moral side of the issue. Save for World War II. And that is how the world has seen us. Last week, the Prime Minister of Denmark, in reaction to the response from the world Muslim community, in response to the cartoons of Muhammad, said that he was surprised. You said, you're what? You're surprised. You hadn't anticipated that this wouldn't be offensive to Muslims? And so you see how much sensitivity work we have to do. I don't know how much attention you have given here at the college to Islamic studies. This is the fastest growing religion in the world. It behooves educated people to know something about it and the values of people who embrace it. If you don't, you're nice people, but you are not educated. Ronald Reagan went to Latin America and toasted the people of the wrong country. And when he was told he wasn't in that country, he said that's where he was going next, and he wasn't going there at all. George Bush had not left America before he became president. And he was elected president of the United States. Ignorance is a permissible offense when you're powerless. But the combination of power and ignorance may destroy the world. This is not somebody else's responsibility. It is yours. So, no point in coming to programs. You see, to listen to speeches, God knows I'm always happy to see people come to listen to speeches because I'm almost certain nobody ever is really. But you must come to listen and have a personal discussion with yourselves. It doesn't matter whether you agree with me or not. That's not the issue. It matters that you think about things. Think. You see, dictatorship, totalitarian systems are easy because you're told what to do. It's safe to just, like we were in the army, that's totalitarianism. You do what you are told. Democracy requires you to think. If you don't, we have electoral rituals and nothing else. And that means the whole thing can be stolen by avaricious people, which is what I think we have happening now in America. But the responsibility, it is not theirs alone, it is ours. Don't think you're too young. You're at the last good age to do the right thing. I was distressed at dinner tonight to learn what a small percentage of students at this school are African Americans. I was concerned to learn generally just how undiverse the school is. That doesn't mean that any great harm will come to the African American students. We've been very well educated on these matters, too well educated on these matters. But it will come at a great cost to those who comprise the American majority, who think the world looks like the group that you're in. It does not. And the lesson and the price for it may one day prove dear to the entire world. You're in college. Now's your chance. Make use of it. Think about things. Become activists. Learn. Talk to each other. When you pay your fees to come here, you are signing a contract with a business to provide you with a service. If that business does not give you what you are paying for, then you must demand of it more. And so, I know educators just like anybody else. Don't think grown-ups know it all. Grown-ups get tired and jaded. You teach the same course over and over and over again. The students don't study, and they come in there looking blank-faced and all this stuff, and I'm going to go home and burn my notes and shoot myself because I can't teach these children, and the mamas and daddies sent them here in the first place because they're sick of them and all of this kind of stuff. So I understand. But there's nothing professors like more than thinking students, even when you annoy them. Just don't sit there like zombies. Develop some opinions and shout them to the world. Take over some buildings, cause some trouble, make yourselves known. Your life will be richer for it. Thank you very much.
Mr. Robinson has said he'd be willing to take a few questions if anybody would like to ask.
Yes, please. Well, she's talking about the Sudan crisis in Darfur, that region. Again, we in looking at any crisis, our tendency in our country is to look at things in the present tense. All crises have antecedents. I mean, they come from somewhere, and they are old. In many parts of Africa, because independence of these countries emerged during the Cold War, The United States, for strategic reasons, embraced leaders that we liked, who supported what we were doing, and sought the overthrow of people we didn't like. And so Congo went up in flames, and now we see that Congo didn't work and all that. And people say, oh, what a tragedy, it's such a mess, and it ought to be rich and that sort of thing. Well, the Congolese, when they were born, wanted Patrice Lumumba as a school teacher, as their president, and he had this view that Congo's treasures were to be put at the disposal of the Congolese people, and it was Dwight David Eisenhower approved plans to assassinate him, and they did, and we imposed on those people Joseph Mobutu, who looted the country, and then we came to disparage Mobutu. You see, this country just doesn't work. The same thing have done in Liberia, where Firestone has really stolen everything from the country, people working for pittances. And Ronald Reagan, gave money to a colonel with a fifth grade education who had overthrown the democratic government. We gave money in the 1980s to deconstruct Liberia, and then we stand back and say, oh my God, isn't it a mess? And nobody sees the American hands on it. And that's what we've done. Did much the same in Sudan with previous leaders, because we thought it was strategically important to us. And when these countries don't become useful to us, then we abandon that leadership, and then their own people do what they think needs to be done with those people. My problem with the situation in Darfur is that we've got an undemocratic government that is largely, in some way, complicit in what is going on in the Darfur region. And so the world has to take action. I just don't trust the news reports. See, I haven't been to Sudan recently, but I have noticed too many times that my direct knowledge of affairs in a particular place would be so different from what I read in the New York Times. I mean, I've become quite jaded about what I read in newspapers. I'm not suggesting that you stop reading newspapers. I think you should, but you must know that at least 10% of what you're reading is just flat wrong and will reflect the view of the writer or the paper or the politics of something else. It's just wrong. And so you mustn't just read the New York Times. You must read many newspapers to see if you can find some median truth in the middle of the bollocksed mess somewhere. There's oil in Darfur. And wherever there's oil, there are bad motives. You see, and I have the sneaking suspicion, I'm predisposed to these kinds of things because of my background. We all bring with us the baggage of our childhoods to the table. I am predisposed to believe that America's view of this is not neutral, and the way it's being described to us is not neutral. And so while I'm saying that the government in Khartoum warrants criticism, I think we need to take a keen look at the whys of how America is seeing this thing. Clearly the world can stop this, but you see, it's how we view the world in any case. In Congo's war, up to 1,000 people have been dying in a week or sometimes days, but we paid no attention to it because those lives don't really matter to us. Why do lives in Sudan now suddenly matter to us, if not because of oil? I can't be convinced because of my own learned cynicism that American governments really care about the people in the Darfur region. We have never cared about the people. I mean, we give the impression, for instance, that we're a generous country. I mean, I suppose most of you have been given to believe that our country does good in the world. And because I think that all governments lie to all their people all the time. I mean, that's what governments do, and that's how they remain governments. But in a free society, you're supposed to try to get behind those lies. We've given the impression to our public that we're a generous country, and we aid countries. As a percentage of GNP, we are at the absolute bottom of the aid-giving countries in the world. I mean, we give each Israeli about for strategic reasons, $1,000 per person. That money doesn't have to be paid back. For each African, traditionally, we've given 96 cents. We don't give any money to anybody. But we give ourselves the impression that we give money to countries. We blocked money to Haiti. The Inter-American Development Bank had voted $146 million for water and health and education. We blocked it. And this was for AIDS medications because Haiti has a terrible bout with it. We blocked it when American tourists brought AIDS to Haiti. We blocked it. Cubans are washing out surgical gloves for reuse. They don't have catheters in their hospitals because of the American embargo, and Cuban children are dying because we block it. What is this madness? And the greatest sadness is that we don't know anything about it. So it makes me wonder when the Germans say we didn't know. That doesn't absolve you of responsibility. Well, you just should have ought to known. Maybe you better begin knowing. And that's what you do at universities. Or else you're just keeping a seat warm. Give it up to somebody else. Yes, sir.
I was just wondering how that situation in Congo, which others were talking about, compares or rounds up to the same situation that goes on in Los Angeles, Oakland, or even Reparations.
Let me give you an idea of this. It's consistent with everything else I've said. I wrote a book about reparations. I didn't intend it. The debt, when I started to write that book, wasn't to be about reparations. You take a group of people. You abduct them and bring them from Africa. 30 to 50 million die in the Middle Passage. You bring them over here, you work them for 246 years for nothing. I went to Harvard Law School. I walk in this place. I have never seen such wealth in my life. Oil paintings all around. Harvard's got the biggest endowment. Harvard is several governments. You're talking about $20 billion in endowment. It is humongous. You say, where does all, these people are rich. And then you don't ask the question, where did it all come from? Well, Harvard Law School was started by a man named Isaac Royall, who got the money to begin the law school from the sale of slaves on his Antiguan sugar plantation. Brown University was endowed by the Brown brothers who got the money from sailing slave ships. The Capitol, the White House, built by slave labor. You see, in America, where you end up is influenced greatly by where you start. You, at the end of slavery, you're supposed to get 40 acres and a mule. We didn't get the 40 acres. We got no mule. We got nothing. People couldn't read. They couldn't write. They'd been worked to death. They had lost their culture. Their wives had been raped. Their children looked like people who weren't from Africa anymore because of what had happened to them. They had no memory of who they were. They had a new religion, a new language, a new everything, a new vision of themselves. And then they were told to run along. It's just like saying two people run a race, and you let one get off running 50 yards up the track with half the money out of the pocket of the other one. And before you let the other runner run, you take out a gun and shoot him in both legs and now run. Catch up. It's a free society. And I'm not talking about race here. Doesn't make any difference. Even if you did this between short people and tall people, between women and men, you do that, you never catch up. And so we support reparations to everybody. Clinton supported it for Volkswagen, had to pay reparations to Jews because Volkswagen used Jewish slave labor during World War II in Germany. So you pay reparations. We've supported reparations to Japanese Americans. But when we come to descendants of slaves, we don't even want to talk about it. Nobody wants to talk about it. And you see, for me, the whole idea was not to get reparations. I want to get reparations. But you see, just like Jews need to talk about the Holocaust, black people need to talk about what happened to us. This takes me to your point. 1 out of 8, every 8 prisoners in the world is an African American. You see, if you don't understand the road there, if you don't understand the history, you see, black people develop an impression of inferiority. And white people develop an impression of superiority. You see how they are? Without knowing anything about how they got there. After slavery, some of us were able to do okay. Since the civil rights movement, some of us have separated from those who have been bottom stuck. What has happened in our country where we have so little generosity, so little charity, so little sympathy, so little sensitivity, when we're paying reparations to bankers and to oil companies and to fat cats who are stealing the national treasury, but we begrudge welfare recipients? What is wrong with Christians who are not Christians? I'm just saying we need to look at ourselves. We've got blacks and Hispanics in prisons fighting each other. You know, we don't know anything about Hispanic history. You see, even the people who are locked out are strangers to each other. We look at the Alamo, save the Alamo. Texas was Mexico. But Americans don't know anything about it. Now, ignorance is a curable disease. That's the good part. But get on with, and the great wondrous thing about college is that, what sickens your parents is that, y'all come home the first, let's say Thanksgiving in the freshman year, and you start talking to your parents and using words like what you are now cognizant of and all of that stuff. And your parents say, oh my God. But that's wonderful. When you get really excited about learning. Because, preparation for a job is training. A liberal arts education has to do with growth and expansion of the human personality, and will give you a longer and richer life. So that one of the things when I played college basketball, you have to understand about athletes is that the life of an athlete is very short. But a thinking person lives until the thinking person dies. And each moment of such a life can be rich and useful. That's what we got to do with ourselves, you see. And we got to somehow, I was talking about this earlier, we've got to somehow overcome the walls in our own minds. I mean, I have my own protective reflexes on the race issue. Because anytime something happens to me that's untoward and the face behind it is white, I draw the conclusion immediately. It's a reflex. You know, it's race. It's race because it keeps me safe. You see, because the moment I start to trust across race lines is the moment I get disappointed again. But the only way we're going to save ourselves as a society is to try to do some of that. But it has to be a reciprocal thing. You know, we have to understand each other's culture. And so Black History Month, I am so happy to see so many whites here tonight. Unless y'all thought the speaker was going to be white. I don't know if you thought about that. Maybe the white students got a different notice from the black students. But I still think that blacks are overrepresented in this audience. That this is higher than the black representation in the school. And at the same time, there ought to be as much curiosity in black culture amongst whites as there is amongst blacks. And I hope when the first American comes, the Native American comes to talk to you, you will have this kind of turnout. Because there is no group to whom we owe a greater debt than to Native Americans. And you see, if you don't listen to Native American music, if you don't understand and listen to their proverbs, if you don't understand their sort of circular wisdom about the relationship of humans to the environment and to the trees and to the birds and to about the meaning of life, you've missed something. You see, they have so much to teach us, and we have so much to learn from them. And so I hope you will turn out. I hope you will become increasingly more curious in the way you see other people from other places. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Oh, no, there's one. I'm sorry, there's one. This is the last one. You know, there's an effort underway. Let me tell you what the difficulties are. The answer is yes, I do think there's a chance, but some things have to happen that cannot be foreseen. I would think the chance would be small, but sometimes miracles do happen. I would think the chances would nonetheless be small. I think they would have been greater years ago. I think what we did in 1984 on South Africa, when some of us went to the South African embassy, 3 of us, and got ourselves arrested, and that thing mushroomed into a global news story, and then 5,000 people came to the South African embassy over the next year to be arrested, and that drove sanctions through the Congress, and we overrode Reagan's veto and brought down the South African apartheid government because governments in Europe followed suit and all of that sort of stuff. That couldn't have happened had we not tricked the press into that kind of mass coverage. I think that's harder to do now. because the press is a different press. There's been so much consolidation in American media. So much of it has been Murdocked. When people in St. Kitts tell me that they like Fox News, I understand the dangers, because that's not news. I mean, it is Goebbels' propaganda. I mean, and naked propaganda. And to call it fair and balanced is the ultimate irony. They do have a sense of humor about what they're doing. For instance, if you take one of the supporters of the impeachment process is Ramsey Clark. Ramsey Clark is one of the finest men that I know. Ramsey is an incurable romantic and idealist about these sort of things. Well, Ramsey was an attorney general of the United States, and his father was a member of the Supreme Court, and he's brilliant. But they've done the same thing to Ramsey that we did to John Brown in this country. There are no John Brown high schools. There's the John Brown Avenue in Haiti. I mean, the Haitians love John Brown. Every year on his birthday, all the flags fly half-mast, because John Brown is a great hero in Haiti, because he began the beginning of the end of slavery in America. But Americans see John Brown as a lunatic, even African Americans. And there were 2 African Americans hanged with John Brown for what they did at Harper's Ferry. John Brown was a great hero. We should have fewer Booker T. Washington high schools and more John Brown high schools. But we're doing the same thing to Ramsey Clark, that you have to push him to the lunatic extreme so that you don't listen to voices like that anymore. That's how he's being described now in the American general press. And so how do we do this? We've got an administration really that doesn't care about law. They probably committed countless impeachable offenses because much of the takeover has already been accomplished. I think we're only superficially democratic now. The first election was stolen in Florida, probably the second one in Ohio. But no real challenges made. The Democratic Party has almost become an accomplice to it. It's very sad to see what has happened in the Democratic Party. And so we've done the same thing to Howard Dean. You see, the one voice in the Democratic Party that seemed courageous and clear, we've made into something of a lunatic too. And they have a very strong genius at doing that. So the question is, you see, the only way to address a mass public is through mass media. But the media belongs to somebody else now. And so we've got to solve the problem of how to communicate with people. You can't do it arithmetically. You've got to do it geometrically. And the only way to do that is electronically. How do we do that? Because you've got to build a base of public support for something like that. That kind of leadership is not going to come from established figures in politics. Say again? Yes. And as a matter of fact, tremendous efforts were made 2 years ago to get Amy Goodman off the air. I mean, they did everything possible to throw Amy out. And she is a lone lion in doing what she is doing. She may be the last Democrat in media trying to do what she is doing. And now it's almost a crime to be defined, even as a liberal, much less a progressive. My God. Pinkos. Yes. Yes.
Talk more about the elections that just took place in Haiti and whether, I don't know who won, I know he was supposed to find out
Well, several things. I am working on a book that comes out in January about my working title is, I don't know if a publisher will live with it, is The American Murder of a Small Black Democracy. And it's about the abduction of Aristide and the way he was taken to the Central African Republic. Maxine Waters and I chartered a plane and went there and got him and brought him back to Jamaica. And then Thabo Mbeki, the president of South Africa, provided a refuge for him and Mildred, his wife, who was a Haitian American in South Africa. I went there to see them in October, and I spent a week with them. They're doing fine. They would like to come home. Let me say something that explains Aristide, and I think René Preval, who will be the president-elect as well. Haiti is, once you visit and spend time there, you recognize it to be more like South Africa used to be than you would ever suspect. The great tactical mistake that the South Africans made arrogantly was to make a religion of white supremacy, and they threw it in the face of the world. They advertised themselves as such, and so they became a kind of poster child for everything that was wrong about race in the world that had to be addressed there. And as long as it was a rather quiet issue, the United States supported it. South Africa existed because of American and German and English and French investment. We provided them everything that they needed to have until they decided that that was counterproductive because of all of the stink that we were able to make about it with all of these arrests and press stories. The same way now that these companies are running from Denmark, you know. One thing about money, money only loves money. Money is thoroughly unprincipled. I mean, it has no real political allegiance. It is there to take care of itself. But South Africa made that mistake. In Haiti, the real people behind all of the coups are the wealthy white and mixed race communities, you see, and they are faced by a black population because of what Toussaint Louverture did that is more African culturally than any black population in the Western Hemisphere. So on no other Caribbean island will you find black people who know hundreds of African proverbs or speak a language that is essentially African like Creole, or have a religion that we have demonized like voodoo. I mean, Americans think voodoo is a joke. It's a religion as valid as Christianity. I mean, because, well, let me not get into that, but I was just saying that when you look at other people's religious beliefs, you say with ease that certain belief systems are absurd, and you don't look at Christianity and see the very obviously absurd notions that you swallow whole about them. Waters parting, and, immaculate conceptions, and all of these kind of things that if somebody told you that this is what fate had befallen their daughter, you wouldn't believe it now, but somehow you believe that may have happened 2,000 years ago, and that is fine. Go ahead. I think people need to believe whatever it is that they need to believe. But you shouldn't credit other people's religions any less than you do your own. But in any case, in Haiti, you have this enormous clash of culture, race, and class. But the business class didn't throw it in the face of the world, and so nobody really knows that they exist. When Aristide was elected, because Aristide, when he was a child, grew up poor in Port Salut, Haiti, very poor and black. All black Haitians had stamped on their birth certificate the Creole word paysan, which means peasant. White Haitians don't have that on their birth certificates. And so the first thing he would do when he was elected was to have one birth certificate for all Haitians, business class. Didn't like that. And so the second thing he would do, he'd say to the business class, for the first time, you will have to pay taxes. They'd never paid any taxes. Didn't like that. And you will have to pay utilities bills. You will have to pay for your electricity and your water. It didn't like that. But then he said something that just had to get him overthrown. He said, I am raising the minimum wage to $2 a day. They'd been running a slave labor reservation in the country in sweatshops. One of the coup leaders, a guy named Andy Aped, who's not even a Haitian, but a Lebanese American, who's running one of these sweatshops on Toussaint Louverture Boulevard in Haiti. That's what the story of Haiti is about. And that's what got this priest overthrown. But you see, the problem America is having now in the world, you see, you get caught in your own predicament because you say to the world, you must be Democrats, you got to stop all this dictatorship stuff. We stand for democracy, we stand for democracy. And the business people have long told George Bush, I wish you would shut the hell up on this point. We don't really want democracy in these places. Because you see what's happening in Latin America. Bolivia is democratic, and for the first time in 400 years, they have elected Evo Morales, an indigenous Bolivian, who says to America, I will be your worst nightmare because of what American policies have meant for Bolivia. Hugo Chavez is now offering oil at concessional prices to people in the state of Illinois to the chagrin of the Republican Party and putting the oil receipts at the disposal of the poor of Venezuela. And so we have tried to overthrow Chavez, but it is clear that the vast majority of people in Venezuela want and love Hugo Chavez. That is what democracy is about. And so we say to the Haitians, we're going to have democracy, so we're going to throw out Aristide. When we had provided the rebels with M50s and M16s and grenade launchers and new uniforms, and the International Republican Institute had gone down there and organized an opposition that had not existed. And we had overthrown that government. And then you say, well, you say Aristide was a dictator. He's absolutely one of the finest human beings I have ever known in my life. Just a splendid and wonderful, modest, humble man, and brilliant. Speaks 7 languages. Just drop dead brilliant. So we demonized him. He's a dictator. He's a human rights violator. He's all that. You throw him out. So we have another election. And the candidate who cares about poor people wins 67% of the vote. Now, we're going to overthrow him too? Probably. Unless Americans stand up for something. Well, how are you going to stand if you don't know? I wonder how much I have talked about tonight. You really didn't know anything about before we started talking about it. And if that's the case, you see that our work is cut out for us. Because if that's the case, you're not good Democrats. Somebody said a long time ago, still makes sense. You're either a part of the solution or you're part of the problem. And people who don't follow these things in a democracy and don't act are part of the problem. And George Bush depends on you. Remember, Congress once told me, he said, I was working for the guys, asked me, don't you need to do some voter registration in your district? And he looked at me and said, Randall, I got all the voters I need. Politicians don't stand for much else usually than election. They do only as much as you make them do. They want to be something, not to do something. But you got to look at yourself very clearly and critically when you can get hoodwinked by the likes of George W. Bush, a man who is palpably dumb. Any other questions? I don't have strong opinions. Yes? On reparations? Yes. I've always said, and my book didn't deal with that so much, and I'll tell you why. Towards the end of it, it did. Because I thought this whole public discussion ought to be run like a lawsuit. First, you should do the proof stage of that something happened, and that something caused a great deal of damage and harm to a group of people. And after in a lawsuit you prevail on those points, only then do you begin to talk about what the remedies should look like. It's rather dangerous and counterproductive to talk about the remedies before you've carried the case on the substantive issues involved, because there's a great difference of opinion on what remedies should be. I've always believed that people like myself wouldn't be eligible for any reparations, and I'm not even talking about individual reparations. I'm fine. I'm not fine in my head. I will always be scarred. I will carry the baggage of my childhood. I mean, grown-ups, old people are just children. My mother's 92 years old, and she talks to me about her girlhood, because inside her body, inside her consciousness, she is still a girl. So I will always be that little boy who was abused in the old South. That's not going to change. But I don't want reparations for myself. This is for those people who've been crushed by the American system, who need to get a fair chance. And so I think that the money should be invested in education, in a different kind of intervention to break cycles. Should be invested in economic development. The state of California is spending more money on prison construction. The United States has 1/20 of the world's population and 1/4 of the world's prisoners. Shouldn't that disturb us? There's something very unsettling about this. And now, private prisons. People are talking about where they can buy stock in private prisons, meaning the only way the value of your stock can go up is to get more prisoners. And you know who's in those prisons? We got 2 million and counting in prison, and over half of whom are African Americans. That's where reparations, in my view, should go. But the first thing we have to have is a discussion, an honest discussion about what happened. Instead of us always talking about somebody else's Holocaust, let's talk for a change about the American Holocaust. Isn't it a disgrace that you can see every monument you want to see on the Mall in Washington, but you see no monument to the 30 million plus who died in the Middle Passage, as if it never happened? We got a statue on top of the Capitol called Freedom, statue of an Indian maiden, made in Bladensburg, Maryland, in 5 parts, brought to the Capitol, hoisted on top of the Capitol by the people who made it, who were slaves, made freedom that sits atop the United States Capitol. Next time you go, look up. They were never paid. Everybody needs to know that. What happened? You hide from your history, it will always come back to haunt you. You got to come to terms with it. We're not the country we think we are. Everybody knows it but us. Thank you very much.